Welcome to The Outlet, an NBA podcast hosted by Nick Fay and Kory Waldron.
On this episode of The Outlet, Kory and I recap Game 3 of the Western Conference Finals between the Los Angeles Lakers and Denver Nuggets. As always, you can find The Outlet on all streaming platforms. Enjoy the show. Game 3 just wrapped up, Kory. We saw the Nuggets pick up their first win of the series, 114-106. Thoughts on this one?
You know what they say, the playoffs don't start till you win on the road.
Great cliche, Kory.
Yeah, there you go. Obviously, there is no home court for those listening. But, the Nuggets played like a team. They had a collective effort. Obviously, Jeremy Grant was the clear-cut third best player on this Nuggets team tonight. Morris was big. I thought Millsap had some solid minutes. Michael Porter Jr. Almost everybody on the Denver Nuggets was contributing in some sort of way. Whereas the Lakers, they weren't getting the same type of production as they got in the first two games. And even though Davis was good offensively, no rebounds until the fourth quarter, which is very unlike Anthony Davis.
That was weird. It took him, 36 minutes on the court to get one rebound, which is just strange, especially because he's been pretty active on the boards and he has a clear height advantage over Millsap or Grant. The only guy that really has size on him is Nikola Jokic. But I agree. I thought that was the major difference tonight was the role players on Denver stepping up and the guys on LA not. And really, Jeremy Grant, 26 points, 7-11 from the field, 10 of 12 from the free throw line. A lot of good defensive plays out there, too. A couple steals to throw in there. If Grant's going to play like this, they have a real shot to win the series. But, at the end of the day, he's not going to shoot 63% from the field, get to the line 12 times and score 26 points, probably again in the series. As good as he's been and as good as he is.
Yeah, the highlight of this game for me for Jeremy Grant is he had the fast break layup with Anthony Davis and LeBron James trailing him. And I was like, all right, this series is just ridiculous at this point in time because Jeremy Grant probably isn't going to do that many times.
Yeah.
But
he got the steal from both guys and then finished over both guys, which is crazy to think anybody's willing to go up for a layup with LeBron behind them. And then they had AD on the other shoulder, which is even more crazy.
And let's also just point out the ridiculous amount of flops that took place in this game. LeBron acting like he got murdered on the court. Paul Millsap with that elbow he got from Rondo late.
Jokic had that one with Dwight Howard where Dwight just kind of tried to get some movement.
Yeah, and then Jokic fell to the ground. There was some ridiculous flopping going on in this game. But obviously that's a part of the game. You need to make sure the fouls are called, especially after there were some lopsided calls in the first game of this series.
Yeah, I agree. I thought the reason that Denver probably got more calls tonight than they previously did was obviously LA wasn't playing the same level of defense, but from the start they felt more aggressive. They felt like the team that was attacking. They were being a little bit more physical, and I felt like you could see that early on, and it kind of set the tone for them. And it felt like at different points of this game that the Lakers were almost coasting.
Well, yeah, coasting and almost felt like it was going to be a blowout at numerous points.
It was technically almost a blowout. They had a 20-point lead from midway through the third quarter to the beginning of the fourth until the Lakers went on that run, and they put in some zone defense. That's something we talked a lot in the Eastern Conference Finals, but the Lakers did that, and that really disrupted what Denver was doing, forced a couple steals on Jamal Murray, got some easy layups for LeBron, AD, whoever it was, really got that transition basketball going because they were not scoring well in the half court.
No, they weren't. And then, of course, obviously, it was a game of runs, right? Denver would go on a run. The Lakers would match the run and get back into the game. Nuggets would start to pull away again. In the fourth quarter also, Jamal Murray has officially become the closer for this Nuggets team because he was big down the stretch. And, that last three, he hit a little bit of a Steph Curry shimmy going back down the court. He's been huge his entire playoff run.
I'll say this about Jamal Murray. This might have been one of his best games of the postseason because offensively he didn't necessarily have it going early on with his jump shot, but to still grab 12 assists is pretty big, especially when you're not necessarily you're a high usage guy in your team, but Jokic is still getting a lot of the touches and necessarily the offense is running through him a lot of the time. So I felt like Jamal Murray really had some big moments here. But Jokic, I thought early, setting the tone and getting those post buckets forced LA to send those double teams. Then he's able to do his things, get the assist or whatever it was. And like we talked, Grant really stepped up. Another guy who stepped up, Monty Morris, off the bench, 14 points, 5 of 7 from the field, 2 of 4 from 3. Just gave you some big minutes, gave you some big plays in a small chunk of minutes.
If you're a Denver Nuggets fan, you're happy for the production you finally got from guys outside of Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. When Jeremy Grant's going to be this, not just forced defensively, but able to get his own offense going, it makes this Nuggets team different.
Makes LeBron work too, which I think is really important because we hinted at the fatigue that we saw late in this game.
And then Michael Porter Jr., even though he didn't play a boatload of minutes, I mean, he hit a couple of tough shots. I mean, that 3 over top of LeBron in the first half was a really tough shot.
I was like, okay, bro.
Yeah, only 19 minutes. LeBron's just accustomed to some guy taking the 3 over top of him in a playoff run at some point in time.
Yeah. But Denver, like if they want to continue to have success in the series and win more games, I mean, you can't really ask more of Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray. Obviously, can probably put up a little bit more in terms of scoring, but LA's giving them a lot of attention, trying to force the ball out of their hands. So guys are going to have to step up and hit those shots, especially when the rotations aren't crispy. And the rotations weren't crispy for the Lakers for the first 3 quarters. We saw them pick up in that fourth quarter. We talked about a little bit of the zone defense, but you got to capitalize when the opportunities are there. And I even felt like at certain points, and I put out a tweet on the OTG account, all that for a drop of blood, because they only had a 10-point lead at halftime, and it felt like they outplayed them so much more than that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big run by Anthony Davis late in that second quarter. I mean, he was scoring it well, and actually there was a point where he was walking to the bench after a timeout, and it was visibly clear that he was mouthing like, "No one can guard me."
Which is the truth,
right? 100% the truth. But then you look at where this Lakers team lost the game, and it was on the boards.
Yeah,
Denver Nuggets 44 rebounds, the Lakers only 25 rebounds. 9 offensive rebounds by the Nuggets, only 4 by the Lakers. The Lakers are a big team by nature. They're a team that normally dominates on the boards. We already mentioned, it took 36 minutes for Anthony Davis to get his first rebound. This Lakers team, they have to rebound better going forward. And they generally have dominated this series, at least through the first 2 games, on the rebounding category.
And it was kind of just laziness tonight. There was opportunities where the board was there and they just didn't box out. There's one play, Jamal Murray just kind of ran in there, grabbed the rebound, put the layup up. And it's like, come on. And even the Lakers' small lineup is still big, essentially. When you're playing AD at the 5, like he's still a center size. LeBron is still a 4 size. Maybe when Markieff Morris is playing the 5, you understand a little bit. But that's where I think Frank Vogel gets into a dilemma, where Dwight Howard, everyone was calling for him to play. But Dwight just makes it that much harder for them offensively, especially when they start to clog the paint and prevent LeBron and AD from working in there. And that's where Anthony Davis was having that success in the second quarter. They were hitting him on some actions, getting in movement across the paint where he kind of would have his athleticism, have that leverage and that head of steam going against a smaller or less athletic guy and getting off his shot comfortably. And that's where Dwight kind of almost gets in the way. Same thing with McGee.
100%. And then, Alex Caruso this game couldn't get a shot to fall. I thought that was a big negative for the Lakers as well.
Especially when you shoot behind the backboard.
Yeah, that one floater attempt he had, that was god-awful. My Lord, stacking the fool coming up.
Yeah, that really hurts. But we talked about it in the preview. Games 1 and games 2, the Lakers were hitting their threes. Tonight, it felt like the role guys weren't as confident. You saw Danny Green hesitate. You saw Kyle Kuzma hesitate. And really, that just can't happen because they need that space for Anthony Davis and LeBron to operate, or it's just going to be easier for Denver to double down.
And I will say late in this game, it definitely felt like the Nuggets had a advantage in the fact they had played so many close games throughout this playoff run that when it got to a drag-out game and everyone looked gassed, the Nuggets were able to dig a little bit deeper, I felt like, to get some extra stamina late in that game, whereas the Lakers, they really haven't been tested in that type of fashion, really, most of this playoff run.
Yeah, at least recently they have. And I think, like Portland, the games I think there was 1 or 2 close games, but against the Rockets, it doesn't seem like anything was really that close, and it just felt pretty confident what the Lakers could do. And I think really the fatigue set in, and maybe that's just the Denver being fresher and playing more games in this span. Their bodies were able to adjust after going through a big game in game 1, game 2, where the Lakers have played probably the least amount of games in the postseason after Miami.
Right, 100%. It'll be interesting to see how they bounce back. Obviously, not looking too far ahead, but Game 4 right around the corner.
What do you think adjustment-wise?
For who, the Lakers?
Yeah, for the Lakers.
I mean, honestly, you got to take care of the basketball first off. I thought there were a lot of sloppy, lazy turnovers. I mean, one play sticks out of Kuzma cutting baseline and missing Rondo in the corner wide open by just throwing it a little bit too far.
Yeah, I don't even know what that pass was, bro.
Yeah.
He was wide open, and he threw it towards the right, out of bounds.
Well, and then Reggie Miller, terrible commentary. He was like, "Oh, good look by Kuz, just a little bit too far outside." Like, no, it's not a good look then, man. It went out of bounds.
He could have easily threw the bounce pass there. It felt like he tried to get a little bit too fancy.
It also felt like Rondo a couple times in this game tried to go with the bounce pass at inopportune times. LeBron had a couple passes that were picked off in the passing lane as well.
One in the fourth quarter in transition was a big one because that's the type of play that was a momentum play that kind of slowed the Lakers down. And then he also had that big missed 3 in the fourth quarter where he missed badly and he knew it. So
a lot of his threes were off badly tonight.
Yeah, 1 of 4 from three. They need to probably get a little bit more from there. And it felt like he just didn't necessarily have it down the stretch when they needed him to get a bucket. And that was kind of a problem where maybe they should have, featured Anthony Davis a little bit more. But I think we have to give credit to Denver for what they did defensively, especially locking down the paint and playing good help defense and trying to force other guys to beat you. And, Rondo 0 of 3 from three tonight, like that's more what we're going to see probably the rest of the series.
And it was noticeable too, because a lot of the threes came late.
And they were wide open. There was one he had a step back three, and I was just like, yo, this is not what you want in the postseason.
Right. It's not whatever game it was against the Rockets where he was like that, right? When he was 8 of 11 from the field and 7 of 8 from three or whatever he was, ridiculous number. I mean, the adjustment wise for the Lakers, you need to rebound better. I mean, you can't afford to have 24 rebounds in a game. You need to crash the offensive glass harder. You need to fight for those extra possessions. Take care of the basketball, of course, as we just mentioned, they were sloppy. I think that's the basic stuff that the Lakers need to do to win this game or win the next game. Because, again, this was another winnable game by the Lakers. But too many careless mistakes down the stretch.
They got it within three late in this game, and they had a chance to win it. I think urgency that really needs to pick up right from the start. Also, interesting, looking at the minute allocation, Danny Green only 20 minutes, KCP only 26 minutes, Kyle Kuzma 26, Rondo 29, Caruso 24. Maybe he leans on Danny Green and KCP in the next game, but it'll be interesting to see because if we kind of talked about it off air, the lack of spacing in that closing lineup really hurts and makes it harder for LeBron and AD. So trying to find those guys some space, maybe get more confidence in the role players early on. But really, if they play that level of defense we saw them play in the fourth quarter throughout the game, they'll get more transition opportunities, they'll get more easy buckets, and they'll limit Denver's scoring because, Denver did put up 114 points, and at times it felt really easy for them. It just felt like they were making the right pass, and, 2 passes, 3 passes, next thing you know, we got an open shot. And they shot 54% of the field and 37% from three. Obviously, they had 18 turnovers, but it felt like most of those came during that fourth quarter run. So the Lakers pick up that defense, and I think, Frank Vogel's going to have to get creative, maybe run a couple more plays and trying to maneuver out there because I feel like there is some pros to playing Dwight in terms of his defense and what he provides you and having that extra defensive player out there, but offensively kind of talked about how it hurts you.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, and you look at some of the role player. I mean, like this was a good game for KCP. I thought Kentavious Caldwell Pope
he's been very good in the postseason.
Yeah, on both sides of the floor, scoring wise tonight and playing defense. I definitely would lean. I mean, I would shorten up the rotation slightly. Even though we've been praising Rondo, probably could have used a little less Rondo. Like when Rondo helped him get back in that game, and they subbed him out for Caruso. And then like 2 possessions later, they put Rondo back in. Probably should have left Rondo off the court, but I feel like they went back to him just simply because he was a part of the run that got them back in the game. But ideally, you would have liked to have someone out there who's a higher percentage 3-point shooter, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think maybe it's part of, Vogel not seeing LeBron like not have it or be as aggressive as he needed, maybe trying to get another playmaker. But I agree. I think the spacing in that situation is more important. And if they can get more like competent play out of Kuzma, I know he had 11 points, but it felt like most of them came in transition. Getting him to play a little bit better would help too. On the Denver side, what do they need to do going into game 4 to even up this series?
I mean, honestly, you need to have the same type of night from Nikola Jokic being aggressive early, Jamal Murray being in a little bit of everything, facilitator, almost had a triple-double tonight, scoring late when you need it. But you need to have production from a third guy. And if it's going to be Jeremy Grant, that's fine. He already provides enough defense for this team. I don't know how realistic it is for him to go 7 of 11, 10 of 12 from the free throw line. He was double-teamed a few times late in the stretch even made the correct pass to get out of the double team. But it feels like you need someone outside of Murray and Jokic to step up. It was Jeremy Grant tonight. I mean, obviously, ideally, it would be him going forward. But I don't know if you can rely on him offensively to have this type of production. You probably need it to be between him, Morris, and Michael Porter Jr., some sort of a spread between the three.
Yeah, it'd be nice if Gary Harris showed up, offensively for a few games or a few quarters even. He's a guy that's capable of dropping 20 or hitting a couple threes. I would probably put my money on Michael Porter Jr. as a guy that could have an offensive explosion, and maybe you can find him some minutes and hide him on some of these weak shooters or weak offensive players in the Lakers. But that's where it kind of gets scary for Denver. I think, coming in with the right attitude, and I like Jokic being aggressive early because like we talked about before, it kind of forced some double teams later in the game and whatever it might be. And Jamal Murray kind of getting that offense going a little bit earlier. But force the Lakers, role players to beat you. Force them to shoot threes, force them to make shots, and really limit what Anthony Davis and LeBron James can do in the post, and that'll change the series. But, Kory, what are you thinking prediction-wise for Game 4?
I'm going with the Lakers. LeBron, AD bounce back, more aggressive from both of the guys. I'm not going to see Anthony Davis without a rebound through 36 minutes. I mean, LeBron, did he have a triple double tonight, or was he just a rebound?
I believe
shot?
so. I think it was 26 triple double of his career.
Right. So he's right up there again. I mean, those two guys are going to show up, I think, and that's going to be the driving force. They look a little bit tired late. They also just didn't look as focused tonight. Probably coming off a big, obviously, game 2 victory at the buzzer. You don't come in as fresh for a game like this. The Nuggets had more to play for at this point in time. It's a must-win game 3 for them. So I'm going with the Lakers in game 4.
Yeah, I'm going with the Lakers here too. I think, you saw it at the end of the game. The urgency picked up, and they're the better team when they're all locked in and playing the right way. The problem is you can't let an offensive threat like Denver get going early in the game, so they need to come out with the right energy in that first quarter, second quarter, set the tone, and put themselves in position to win and, take a really strong lead in the series, I guess. But when you're talking about the Nuggets, they prefer to be down 3-1.
Right, so I mean, you might not want to lose game 4, right? I would also say, just to piggyback off that, foul trouble, or not like necessarily foul trouble, but fouling. Because I know, like, in the third quarter, Denver's in the bonus with like 9-11 left in the third quarter. They shot 29 free throws, just 22 by the Lakers. Lakers only shot 63% from the free throw line. So definitely taking care of the free throw opportunities and keeping Denver off the line. Because, again, their offense, we mentioned, it is very talented when they get going. And if they're also getting free points at the line, that's when Denver's at their best.
Yeah, 100%. As always, a pleasure, Kory. Big thanks, everybody, for listening. And you can catch us for all of the conference final recaps on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, and OTGbasketball.com.
Peace out, knuckleheads.